Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Homily Chat. I'm Father Darryl Millette here in cold Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Right now, I guess it's not too bad. It's minus 5 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is down south. 20s something,
Yeah,
maybe?
some about 25 or so, 20, 23 or so. But I was watching I saw your Facebook feed and Instagram. You had some snow this last week. Was that the first snow you got of the year?
It was the first snow of the year, and me being very forward thinking, decided to get my dog a haircut just a few days before the snowfall. She was not thrilled with me.
I bet. So she went outside and just wanted to immediately come back inside.
Or she was motivated. I'll put it that way, because when you let the dog go outside, it's typically for one or two reasons.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's about it. We're in the bathroom humor. This is going to go well. How is Father Michael Liliedahl just south of San Francisco?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's definitely not snowing here. It's definitely nowhere near the minuses. It is a little bit cooler. I think last week was in the 90s. This week is about 75. So I want to say maybe 20, 23 degrees for Canadians in Celsius. But Father Darryl, I was thinking about this because you mentioned before we went on air that you had a little snafu with trying to order some food for your parish staff for the luncheon. And I was thinking about parish staffs coming together, and I remember a story someone once told me that at the parish staff, the whole parish staff would come together and plan the homily or plan the talking points and write out an outline for the homily. And I was wondering if you ever have heard of this, or if you've done it, or if you are in favor of it, or if it makes you want to throw up, or like what are your thoughts on something like that?
I've never done something quite like that exactly. One of the formats that of opening prayer that we sometimes use for our pastoral council meetings involves kind of like a group discussion, group reflection on the gospel for the upcoming week. So sometimes there's been some of that, but I don't think I would say that that was actually what the homily ended up being either. I might have like taken some ideas perhaps here and there, but to actually workshop a homily like that, I don't think I've ever. This podcast is probably the most workshopping of homilies I've done in quite some time. So
And I have to say that kind of going behind the scenes, it was one of the motivations for starting the podcast was the ability to workshop it, but also forcing me to kind of workshop it in a way and to start looking at it. But one of my classmates from seminary, his first assignment, he was at a parish where they would all sit together and they would workshop the homily, and he was expected that would be the bones of his homily. That would be the outline of his homily. And I remember thinking that I wasn't a fan of it, and I had to think a little bit about why I wasn't a huge fan of it. And I think part of the reason I came to was there's a very real chance if you do that the homily isn't, in a sense, authentically coming from the preacher himself. Having to preach on something that is not from you and not really the way you might do things, I think is in a sense kind of inauthentic. And that's and I was thinking about this, and that the homily is really the kind of most control that a priest has over the mass. Everything else is almost dictated to us, right? What you're supposed to do, the prayers you say, and I was thinking about this actually at daily mass. I said, oh, after I've finished the prayers of the faithful, which come right after the homily, everything I do is exactly the same, on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, unless there's a saint's feast day, right? The prayers are exactly the same. The actions are exactly the same. In a daily mass, especially, it seems like the only thing that is ever different is the homily. And so that, in a sense, is where the priest has the most control. He can change the most things. He can say things that another priest wouldn't have done. And I was thinking that it is actually a good thing if the priest authentically proclaims Christ through his humanity. But in order to do that, he has to have kind of embodied the gospel, or taken the gospel into himself, in a sense, to be able to proclaim that in a way that is both authentic to the gospel, but also authentic to his humanity. And having kind of an outlined kind of just given to you. And this is what I also feel about, and I'm not going to name names. I wouldn't even know any names to name, but priests who just kind of use a pre-written homily that somebody else did, that just, they pull it in. I want to say, that's not you. It may be the gospel being proclaimed, but it's not the gospel integrated into your authentic human life, then proclaimed to the people, which I think is the goal of any good homily. Not that all my homilies have ever done it, but that should be the goal. Is that
they're all great. They're all great.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. But that should be the goal, is that we've authentically taken that gospel into ourselves, or the readings and the prayers and the liturgy, that we've made it our own, that in a sense that it's both our own and also that belongs to the church. And then we proclaim it back to the church, in a sense, to help them make it their own as well. And I want to say, how can you help them make it their own if you haven't made it your own first? And so that was kind of my rationale for thinking, like, this may not be the best way to do it. Yeah. Go ahead if you want to say something.
I was going to say too, by the way, I don't know if you can hear my dog or not. She's just chewing on a bone right now, just out of frame, and it's loud to me. I have no idea if this microphone's picking it up or not. If you hear
I wasn't really hearing it, so okay, I think you're good.
she's just having a grand old time. Yeah, I mean, to add to that too, I mean, the homily is also a liturgical action, and yeah, I mean, it's a fine line of, preparing for a liturgical action, vitally important, of course, but ultimately it's a liturgical action for that time, that place, ultimately that congregation. Although I know we're doing a lot of live streaming and podcasting homilies and whatnot, especially now, but ultimately it's a liturgical action too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I kind of, and that's where I was thinking, but I was also thinking, there's a benefit to that. There is in a sense, a benefit to it, that a consistent homily, or at least fairly consistent in terms of the general scope of it, is being heard by everyone at the parish who comes. And there is kind of, in a sense, a unifying action to that. I don't think it's a big enough pro to overcome the con that I had mentioned before, but I know some parishes have done it before, where they have, a single priest preach every mass, even if he's not the celebrant, for a weekend. I think for that specific reason, that they want everyone who comes, regardless if they come the Saturday vigil or Sunday early morning or Sunday mid-morning or Sunday evening, to hear the same thing, so that they might be able to discuss it, that everyone is kind of on the same page. One, that can be absolutely exhausting depending on how many masses you have. But two, I still think that, as you said, it's kind of a liturgical action, and there is a sense of cohesiveness to the primary liturgical minister being the celebrating priest, also being the homilist, to kind of carry that through. I think there's a continuity that's important, that I struggled to kind of be able to absolutely define. And obviously, I mean, that's not perfect. It's obviously allowed that you have another priest preach. It's allowed that the deacon preach, and the deacon would also kind of be the assisting minister through it. So it would make sense that, especially with that continuity, if the deacon proclaims the gospel. But this is just kind of things I was kind of going through my head about, how, I'm not a pastor yet, you are. And so, I become a pastor, how might I do some things or not do some things, or what are the pros and cons, and kind of coming to making my decision. But I think the other thing is, I know I appreciate the confidence that my pastor has in allowing me to, to come up with my own, what I want to preach on, my own topics, my own kind of preaching. And it's a sign of confidence, I think, and I appreciate it. Not that I wouldn't be opposed to saying, if he said, okay, on this day, I think we really need to preach about this, or, do something like that. But it allows, I think, the homily to be authentically mine, and for me to be able to authentically proclaim Christ through how I have integrated that gospel into hopefully my life, but at least my thinking and prayer that week or so.
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how I've worked it here as well. Because my parish, not too many parishes in my diocese have more than one priest. A lot of times it goes the other direction. one priest for 3 or 4 places. But here there are 2 of us. And I mean, basically the way it's worked out, and all of my associates over the years have totally agreed and been on board with it, is that if you're presiding at a mass, you're preaching, and the other priest is not. And the dog is also not preaching. If you're listening on the podcast, you're seeing my dog just licking my elbow right now. It's very exciting. Should watch it on YouTube. But yeah, I mean, that's basically how we've worked it out here, and it's been working pretty well. But I have heard of, again, the other idea where it's the same priest, the same deacon, the same homily, basically the entire weekend, which, I get from like a point of view of wanting to have a common message that all the people hear, like you say. I mean, there's pros and cons to each way, and the way that we've done it here at this parish is basically whoever's presiding preaches. And basically the rationale there is that, I had my associates, at least, for a few years, they all came from different countries, and they really wanted to be able to preach every week, and I see, I get that. I want to as well. Right. And so to give that opportunity for all of us to preach every weekend, the direction basically.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And so, kind of speaking on preaching every weekend, let's take a look at this weekend's readings.
That's a good segue.
Oh, thank you. I'm working on those. They're getting a little bit better. A little. We're rounding the corner, not so sharply sometimes. So,
do you notice the lower third looks correct? I guess you can't even see it.
I can't see it because I see it on Zoom. So,
yeah.
Oh, but I do see it on Facebook. So there, we have it. Are you reading it or am I reading it?
Yeah, this time? I can read it. Sure.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, O Lord.
When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Now, before I kind of get into what I want to talk about, to give a little background, right? If we remember last week, we had the argument over whether or not we should pay the census tax, right? Is it lawful to pay the census tax? And Jesus says, well, give me the coin. Whose image is on the coin? And then the one right before that, the gospel before that was the wedding banquet. And Jesus saying, the king went out and invited everyone, but not everyone came. And then you also had the guy who showed up without the wedding garment. What I find interesting is they skip a little section here in the gospel before we get to today's. And they reference it, but they don't really talk about it, because the gospel begins with the phrase, when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees. But we don't actually hear Jesus silence the Sadducees. And what he had silenced them about was marriage at the resurrection. So if you're familiar with the gospel, you remember that story of the Sadducees come to him and say, well, there's a woman who married a brother, but he died. And so she married the next brother and he died. And so she married the third brother and he died, all the way down. So essentially she had married all 7 brothers. Yeah. And they say, well, at the resurrection, whose wife will she be? And Jesus kind of puts them in their place. At the resurrection, there is no marriage. And what I find interesting here is the Pharisees and the Sadducees are not groups that usually come together in peaceful agreement. They're groups that are often butting heads with each other. And here they seem to be teaming up to come after Jesus, because first the Sadducees come at him and Jesus silences them. And then the Pharisees are like, I guess it's our turn now. And so they come together, and it's people continually coming after Jesus, trying to find fault with him. They're coming after him with, in a sense, a hermeneutic of fault finding, right? This lens that they don't want to hear what he has to say. They're trying to test him. They're trying to tempt him. They're trying to find some kind of fault with him. And we saw that also with the coin as well. And so I remember one of the things that I've said before is, how do we come to our faith? How do we come towards Jesus? How do we approach the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of the church? Do we approach them like we're trying to test them? We're trying to find a loophole. We're trying to find fault with them. Or do we approach them like we should approach Jesus? Jesus, here I am, meek and humble of heart. Teach me. Teach me. What do I have to learn? And I think in this instance, the Pharisees are faking that attitude, because they come to him and they say, teacher. And I know in some translations they say master. They say teacher or master. Which commandment of the law is greatest? And it's I'm debating whether or not, I think I was debating whether or not to say this. I'll go ahead and say it. So, as a teacher, sometimes we have students, and I certainly won't name names here in the past, but students who are overly polite, but that it's just a mask, right? That they're just conniving behind your back, but they're just so overly polite to your face. And that's exactly what's happening here, right? These Pharisees are conniving behind Jesus' back. They're trying to trip him up, but they come to him with this false sense of humility, and say, oh, teacher, oh, master, which commandment of the law is greatest? And this gets to the point where what Jesus actually says is what I'm going to preach on. These two commandments, in a sense, sum up the entire 10 commandments. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind. And then the second is like, you should love your neighbor as yourself. And many a saint in the past has noted that the 10 commandments can kind of be divided up. The first ones are, what is our relationship with God? And the second part, it's not 5 and 5, but more 3 and 7. The last ones are, what is our relationship with our fellow human beings, with our family, with our neighbor, with our stranger. And so I kind of want to say this gospel can be an excellent examination of conscience for you. Some people suggest kind of going through every 10 commandment and saying, okay, did I break this commandment? Did I break this commandment? Did I break this commandment? I kind of want to say you can do it, an examination of conscience, in kind of, instead of those 10 steps, you can do it in 4 steps. And I want to say, love the Lord your God. What did I do that I should not have done that might have violated the love of God? And then the next question would be, what didn't I do that I should have done to love the Lord? And then we turn around, we ask those same questions about, our neighbor, which could be our family, our literal neighbor, our stranger on the street. What did I do to anyone else that I shouldn't have done to them? And what didn't I do for any of them that I should have done? And I think that'll give us a well-rounded and give us something to bring into the confessional, because I find in hearing confessions oftentimes that people come in and they're like, I don't really know what to say. I think an examination of conscience can be difficult for people. And so giving them something that's both open enough where they can think about their own life, but also concrete enough where they can come up with instances where they may have sinned via commission or omission, can be important. And so I was thinking about taking this gospel and kind of converting it into a practical examination of conscience that a person could use going into the confessional.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, nice and practical. That's a very good thing, especially in, I find, I don't know if you're finding this or among your people or among yourself, but things have gotten pretty hectic for a lot of people. So just like nicely simplifying, getting practical, giving a good, simple, easy to remember kind of a message based on what is ultimately a pretty simple sounding set of teachings might be a really good way to go this weekend. Because sometimes we all just need to be reminded, yeah, this is what it's about. I mean, I've been thinking a lot lately about this sort of idea of, the commandments of God, because I'm studying a lot of canon law. I've mentioned it previously. Right now I'm working on a midterm exam. I haven't done one of those in over 12 years. It's a take-home midterm because obviously everything's online. So it's canon law, case studies and whatever. But the way I've been thinking about it is there's a lot of these laws, and we're dealing with a lot of like little details and whatever. But then there's the kind of overarching laws that kind of guide everything and give you fundamental principles. And I think of it often in terms of hockey, because pre-COVID I play hockey. Currently, I don't know. I'm not terribly comfortable going to the rink just yet. I think it's a little anyway. But in hockey, you've got your overarching rules of the game. What's the whole point of the whole thing, right? It's that you're on ice, you've got a puck, and you're trying to put the puck in the opponent's net and keep it out of your own. That's basically, love the Lord your God, right? Like that's the basic fundamental principle. Now within that, you got a whole ton of other rules and commandments, if you will. Don't go offside, don't trip a guy, don't, all these different things, right? But the fundamental thing, that's like, it's so crucial to really be working towards that. And in some ways I find Jesus is kind of pointing us to that fundamental, like this is what it's all about. Love the Lord your God, and not because he's somehow needy. God's not needy. God is love, who is loving us into existence right now. And we fulfill who we truly are when we receive that love and we turn who we are in love. So it's really the fundamental humanity, really, what he's commanding us to do. It's to live our humanity in the most fundamental way. So I don't know if that's a homily. It's probably not a homily yet. I'm still working on that idea. It's not nearly as practical as yours. I like yours because it's practical.
Yeah. Well, I like what you were saying, that, and that analogy that all the rules are designed to serve the big rule. Right. And everything in your example of hockey, your basic rule is score goals, keep the other team from scoring goals. That's the end goal. And then you have all these rules kind of in there. And your mentioning of studying canon law reminded me back to, we have to take an introduction to canon law class in seminary. And we started, the professor said, I'm going to start with the last canon, we're going to go through everything else kind of in order, but I'm going to start with the end. And then he said, even the last question of every single exam we had in that class, we only had two, we had the midterm and final, but the final question was always, what is the last canon in canon law? And I see you're trying to look it up. I have the number here. It's 1752 if you want to find it.
I mean, it's dealing with transfer and removal of pastors. but the last part of the last law, I think, is what you're really getting at, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it's in cases of transfer, the prescripts of Canon 1747 are to be applied, blah, 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 right? And then it says, canonical equity is to be observed, and the salvation of souls, which must always be the supreme law in the church, is to be kept before one's eyes. Put the puck in, keep it out.
Exactly. There it is, right? What is the law of the church? Salvation of souls. What is the goal of the church? Salvation of souls.
Yeah.
And everything else is designed to serve that. And I think that's like what you were saying. That's exactly what we're getting at with today's gospel, right? What are the big things? Love the Lord your God. Love your neighbor, right? Everything else, all the other rules are designed to fulfill those two rules. So,
and I mean,
so that's what we always have to keep it though. So that's what we have to keep in the front of our mind.
Right? Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. So I said, that those are always the two things just to keep in the front of our mind. Am I loving God? Am I loving my neighbor? Just like the supreme law of the church, right? I mean, all the canons is this leading to the salvation of souls?
I mean, it gets to the opening prayer, the call to prayer, right? Almighty ever-living God, increase our faith, hope, and charity, and make us love what you command, so that we may merit what you promise.
I like it.
Put the puck in, keep it out.
Yep. And it's interesting that because, right, this gospel is always lined up on the 30th Sunday. So this is always, when this gospel is read at Mass, or the Sunday Mass, this is always the prayer that begins with. And I was actually looking at this gospel and trying to, and sometimes we kind of try to shoehorn in things. And then we think, oh, it may work. And we begin to try to shoehorn it in, and then it doesn't work. And I was trying to shoehorn in this. I didn't even realize this was in the opening prayer, but that idea of faith, hope, and love. Um, Faith, hope, and love, of course, are the cardinal virtues. And so I was looking at, okay, what are the three ways that we're called to love the Lord our God? With our heart, with our soul, and our mind. And I was trying to think, do those three ways line up with some way with faith, hope, and love? And one way is kind of living loving our God in a faithful way, one loving our God in a hopeful way, one loving our God in a loving or charitable way. And I wasn't really able to kind of make them fit. I bet if I had tried and kind of twisted things a little bit, I could have made them fit. But I think that was just a lesson in like, oh, you had this idea when you were reading this, oh, love the Lord with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Oh, is our mind, kind of that faith, and our soul is hope, and our heart is love or charity? And I began to play with it a little bit and said, nope, I don't think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna twist things too much here to make them fit. I'm gonna twist them out of their meaning to make them fit, and so I had to just abandon it.
So I just want to look up because Deuteronomy 6 is what this echoes, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's tomorrow evening's night prayer, correct?
I am not sure.
Yeah. So basically, I'm just trying to look it up because I think there's it's an interesting slight difference in how the commandment is given in the gospel versus how it's given in Deuteronomy. I mean, this probably doesn't mean anything. It's just my brain works in interesting ways. So yeah, Deuteronomy 6. It's the Saturday night prayer reading. So if you're doing the Liturgy of the Hours, night prayer on Saturday evening, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Therefore you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. And yet in Matthew, it's with all your mind. I don't know if there's if those words somehow line up from the Hebrew to the Greek, or if it's just quoted different. I honestly don't know. I just was thinking that there's a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah, there is. And that prayer from Deuteronomy is, of course, in Jewish culture, it's called the Shema Prayer, right? Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one. You shall love the Lord your God, with all your heart, your mind, and your strength. And it forms the centerpiece of, and I was just looking this up online, of Jewish kind of morning prayer and evening prayer, which would make sense that it becomes part of our night prayer. But you may have seen this when you've gone to the Holy Land. Is after this, they talk about to pass this prayer on to your children, right? And so they would
drill them into your children.
Yeah, they would have this prayer on a piece of paper, and then they would have it strapped to their arms at the Wailing Wall. It was absolutely fascinating to read. And actually, when I came back, I had some friends who had been to the Holy Land before, and they said, "Oh, there's this great place that has great shawarma and falafel. Let's go there for we took a hike. These are pre-pandemic times. We took a hike and went to this restaurant, and it was run by an Orthodox Jewish family, and they had that prayer in a scroll up right next to the doorway, so that as they would leave the place and enter the place, they would touch it. And I know that in some Jewish people do that as well, that they have it at the door of their house, so that they touch this prayer as they enter and exit their house, that it's kind of constantly reminding themselves of this exact prayer. And so, it's a prayer or a commandment that goes not just into Christianity, right, but is from the very, very beginnings of God's covenant with his people, to remember to love the Lord your God.
Yeah, that sounds like a very beautiful practice, actually. I mean, reminding what it is ultimately all about. That's tremendous. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I saw how, I don't know if you saw how tight they wrapped it. I mean, it was cutting off the blood flow. I think that it's almost like, every now and then when I turn on professional wrestling and they have this really tight thing here, and the design is to cut off the blood flow so that the muscles look a little bit bigger and more defined. But that's what it seemed like when they had this wrap, that it was so tight that it was just kind of cutting off the blood flow. Yeah. But I do like that notion of just kind of touching it on your way in and way out, because I found that can actually be a helpful prayer place to put things, is right on the door out of your house. And And that was actually a study technique I had in the seminary, was something I needed to know or memorize. I would just put on the door of my room so that I would see it and just have to repeat it to myself as I walked out the door. And I was telling somebody else, that's how I memorized the Prayer of Absolution that a priest says at the end of confession. Is the last semester of my last year at seminary. I just printed it out on a piece of paper, taped it on my door, and then every time I walked out of the door, I'd have to say that prayer, and which is good because, yeah, they have it printed, but that's a prayer that a priest has to have memorized to be able to say. And now, I can just say it from rote because, every morning or the 2 or 3 times I'd walk out of my door every day, I would just say it to myself.
No, that's a fantastic idea too. Lots of practical stuff here today. This is pretty great. It's pretty great.
Yeah,
I'm just dealing with a dog licking my elbow and randomly chewing.
That can be a practical thing as well. But what I think what I need to do is I need to, instead of just giving it something I need to memorize, I need to make it a prayer that I say and come up with something. And so that might actually be something I try to do this upcoming week, is to find a little prayer or something just to put on the door that I say every time I walk out of my room, to kind of ingratiate it in my life the way the Jewish people, or at least this family that I saw when they would touch this prayer, would try to ingratiate, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your strength into their life, because I have found that definitely works. It puts it in there in a way that you don't forget it.
No, that's fantastic. Do the opening prayer. I don't know.
Yeah.
Might be a little long to memorize. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, because the first reading really it's mostly talking about the love of neighbor part of it. Just some basic, some of the commandments that you see in Exodus. Thus says the Lord, you shall not wrong or oppress a resident alien, for you are aliens in the land of Egypt, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just a lot of very practical ways of living out, the first 2 commandments, especially the second commandment that Jesus cites in this first reading. So the first reading connects very well. The second reading, we're just reading through 1 Thessalonians. I don't know if it directly connects as well. I guess they all do eventually. Love of God and so forth.
But that might be a bit of a stretch, just trying to put that second reading in there.
Yeah. I mean, basically, the people of those regions report about us what kind of welcome we had among you, how you turned to God from idols. I mean, loving the Lord your God with everything that you are is essentially to turn from idols, from other things we would put in God's place. I mean, there's some connection. Might be a little bit, you probably don't have to go that far. I think this is just a more of a simple weekend. Just preach the gospel.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think it's something that we need to take into account is, I mean, people are stressed. I mean, their jobs are completely online. Their kids are online. They're trying to do both. And to provide some kind of respite that is, in a sense, meaningful, but not it doesn't continue to stress them out, right? It provides some of that kind of just relaxing. It's simple but meaningful. And that's what I think you should be aiming for.
Sounds like an episode title. Simple but meaningful. We hope.
That I'm going to put it in there. That's what that's the title for this episode. It'll be simple but meaningful.
Or so we hope, anyway.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so we thank everyone for joining in. I know the timing of this episode is kind of a strange timing, as it has been basically since we started the podcast. It's never been consistent. But thank you for everyone for watching, either with us live or after the fact watching or listening to the audio. You can always head over to homilychat.com for the latest audio and video, and it's on Facebook as well. The links are over at homilychat.com. Send us your comments. We'd love to hear from you. I do have one quick request as well for all of those who would be watching or listening. This coming week, I'm finally taking my annual retreat. Usually that happens in May with all the priests. Oddly enough, it did not happen in May because, reasons. But I have a class break next week, and I am heading out of the parish for a few days and taking a retreat. So just please keep me in prayers as we keep each other in our prayers. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And because Father Darryl is going to be on that retreat, next week we will be filming again on Friday, as Father Darryl will be driving back kind of Friday midday back to his parish. And so hopefully same bat time, same bat channel as this week for next week.
Yeah, exactly. Same patch. That's pretty great. Yeah. On that note, I have nothing to add to same bat time, same bat channel.
All right. Well, then I will say your line. Everyone keep your stick on the ice, and we will see you next week.
That's the this would have been the perfect episode to use that line.
Yeah.
My dog's barking at that. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Have a good week.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.